The smell hit me before the door even opened. A faint electric burn, like scorched wiring mixed with something older, something dead. I was supposed to be off shift. At 11:42 p.m., my dispatcher, Marla, called, her voice low like someone might be listening. "I've got a work order. No one else will take it. The outage isn't on the grid. It's localized. One house." Localized. Already wrong. Power doesn't fail in just one house without tripping somewhere else first. The address was on the far edge of town, past the last working streetlight, where the asphalt narrows and the GPS starts spitting bad directions. The place sat alone behind a sagging fence, its siding warped and gray. Every window was black except for the attic, where a single weak light glowed. Not flickering, pulsing. I stepped out of my truck, tool bag slung over my shoulder. The air was unnaturally still. No wind, no crickets, just the low, steady hum of something electrical, somewhere deep inside. The front door opened before I could knock. A man in a frayed bathrobe stood there, pale and sweating. His eyes didn't quite meet mine. "You're here to fix it," he said, not asking, stating. "What exactly is the problem?" I asked. He licked his lips, glancing toward the hallway swallowed in darkness. "It's in the wires," he said. "It talks through them sometimes. You'll hear it if you listen long enough." A cold knot formed in my stomach. I'd heard plenty of strange things on this job. Rats in walls, pipes knocking, even voices from old radios picking up stray signals. But this man wasn't talking about stray signals. "You sure it's not the wiring," he cut me off. "It's hungry." Every instinct told me to walk away, to get back in my truck and leave this to someone else. Instead, I stepped inside. The door shut behind me with a click that sounded far too deliberate, and somewhere, deep in the walls, something exhaled. The hallway smelled faintly of copper, like a handful of pennies held too long in your palm. The walls were painted in old yellowed white, but hairline cracks ran through the plaster like veins. I could hear the faint hum again, not coming from a single source, but from everywhere. The man in the bathrobe walked ahead of me, barefoot, his steps soundless on the warped floorboards. "It started 3 nights ago," he said. "Lights flickering, TV turning itself on. I unplugged everything, but it kept going." "Did you check your breaker?" I asked, out of habit more than curiosity. He gave me a smile that wasn't a smile at all. "Breaker's fine. Power company says I'm getting full voltage, but the house, it still takes more." We stopped in the kitchen. Every appliance was unplugged. The refrigerator door hung open, dark inside, but beads of condensation rolled down its surface like it was sweating. From somewhere upstairs came a faint scratching. The man stiffened. "It doesn't like me in the attic, but it'll let you in. It knows you're here." "Knows I'm here?" I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. He didn't answer. I pulled out my flashlight. "Look, I just need to check your main wiring. If it's bad, I can..." The hum spiked, cutting me off. It wasn't loud, but it pressed into my skull, vibrating my teeth. My flashlight flickered once, then steadied. The man stepped back, gesturing toward the stairs. "It's waiting." I hesitated. I've climbed into attics before, cramped, dusty, full of dead insulation and maybe a few raccoons. But this, I couldn't shake the feeling that the light I'd seen outside was still there, pulsing, breathing. The scratching stopped. Then from the attic, a single, deliberate knock. It wasn't on wood. It sounded like it came from inside the wires themselves. The man didn't move. His voice was barely a whisper. "If you go up there, it'll notice you." The hum grew deeper, almost warm now, like something was leaning close. I started climbing anyway. The stairs groaned under my weight, each step sounding too loud in the thick air. The hum followed me, threading through the wooden beams, growing sharper as I climbed. Halfway up, my flashlight dimmed again. I slapped it, and the beam steadied, but just barely. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, bending in the wrong direction. The attic hatch was a square of darkness above me. I reached for the pull cord, and it was warm, almost slick, like it had been gripped by sweaty hands just seconds ago. When I tugged, the hatch swung down with a sigh, releasing a breath of stale heat mixed with a faint metallic tang. My flashlight beam swept across rafters and insulation, but for a second I thought I saw something retreat, slipping deeper into the shadows. The man's voice floated up from below. "If it moves toward you, don't breathe." I almost asked him what that meant, but the hum rose into a ringing pitch, filling my ears until I couldn't hear my own thoughts. I climbed the narrow ladder into the attic. The space was low and cramped, dust motes swirling in the weak light. The wiring along the beams was wrong, bundled too thick, like veins bulging under skin. They pulsed faintly, a slow rhythm that didn't match the hum. I crouched, tracing the cables with my light. They didn't lead to junction boxes. They disappeared straight into the wood, as if the house had grown them. A soft scurrying came from the far corner. My flashlight caught a patch of something wet glistening on the floorboards. It wasn't water. It was thicker, dark, and smelled faintly sweet, like rotting fruit. Then I heard it. A second hum, higher and closer, vibrating through my bones. The wires shifted, not swaying, slithering. Something inside them was moving toward me. The ladder creaked behind me. I turned my head just enough to see the man's face staring up from the opening. Pale, eyes wide, whispering so quietly I almost didn't hear. "It's found you." The hum became a growl. The hum swelled until it was no longer just sound. It pressed against my skull, sank into my teeth, rattled my ribs. Something shifted in the dark corner of the attic. My flashlight's beam quivered over it, and for a split second I saw a shape. Wrong angles, too many joints, skin the color of ash. Then it melted back into shadow, but the wires quivered where it had been. The man below didn't move from the ladder. "Don't run," he whispered. His voice was shaking. I could hear it now. Not just the hum, but a faint clicking, like fingernails tapping glass. The sound circled me, moving through the beams, the insulation, the walls themselves. The air grew hotter, the metallic tang thick enough to taste. My throat tightened. I knelt to inspect one of the thick black cables, hoping for something rational. But the instant my fingers brushed it, a shiver shot up my arm. Images flashed in my head. A hallway, a screaming face, darkness swallowing a doorway. I staggered back, nearly dropping the flashlight. Something emerged from the far shadows. It was hunched, spider-like, its limbs impossibly long, each ending in a tapered point. Where a face should have been, there was only a smooth surface with a single, wet, unblinking eye at its center. The hum came from it. The eye locked on me. I couldn't move. My pulse thundered. My lungs screamed for air, but my body wouldn't obey. The thing crawled forward, each limb bending in unnatural ways, slipping effortlessly over rafters and wires. The attic seemed to stretch with every movement, as if the space itself warped to make room for it. The man below hissed, "Down! Now!" That broke the spell. I lunged for the hatch, but the creature's front limbs lashed out, striking the floor where I'd been. The boards splintered like paper. I dropped through the opening, landing hard, my flashlight clattering away. Above, the thing's clicking grew louder. It didn't chase. It just stood at the opening, its single eye watching me, and it didn't blink. I was halfway down the attic ladder when a sound made my skin crawl, something dragging across the floor above, slow and deliberate. Pete's face paled. "You heard that, right?" I didn't answer. My boots hit the second floor landing, and I headed straight for the front door. I needed air, space, anything that wasn't inside this place. I grabbed the doorknob, twisted hard. Nothing. It didn't turn. I tried again. Harder, metal grinding under my hand. Locked. Pete muttered something behind me and went for the deadbolt, but his fingers froze mid-motion. "There's no lock," he whispered. He was right. The brass plate was smooth, no keyhole, no latch, just metal welded flat, as if it had never been a working door at all. "That wasn't like this when we came in," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I realized I couldn't remember the exact moment we'd entered. We'd walked in, sure, but through this door, or had it been another? I stepped back, tried the windows in the living room, painted shut, glass thick with grime. I slammed a fist against one. The sound was dull, like hitting concrete. From somewhere deep in the house came the creak of footsteps. Slow, heavy, not ours. Pete grabbed my arm. We need to. The overhead lights flickered, humming louder than before. Each pulse of light made the shadows stretch and warp along the walls, bending in ways they shouldn't. One of them, a tall, spindly shape, seemed to hesitate, then lean toward us. My chest tightened. I pulled Pete toward the kitchen, thinking there might be a back door. But as we entered, the layout was wrong. Hallways where cupboards should be, walls that hadn't been there before. The hum rose to a screech. The smell of ozone stung my nose. And from the dark hall ahead, something whispered, low and almost electrical, my name. The hallway stretched out before us, long and narrow, but it's wrong. The walls seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting subtly with every step. The wallpaper, once faded floral, now shimmered like it was wet, colors shifting and pooling like ink dropped in water. Pete's footsteps echoed hollowly behind me. "I don't like this," he muttered. "Feels like we're walking inside a living thing." I swallowed hard, flashlight tight in my grip. The hum had dropped to a low vibration beneath the floorboards, a heartbeat beneath the walls. It pulsed in time with the faint glow now creeping under the baseboards, an unnatural red-orange light that didn't come from any bulb. We rounded a corner. The floorboards warped beneath my feet, bending upward like ribs. The air grew thick, heavy with an acrid scent, ozone mixed with something sweeter, almost metallic. A door appeared at the end of the hallway. It was featureless except for a small, circular window cracked with spiderweb lines. Behind the glass, shadows flickered. I reached for the knob. It was cool and slick, like oil. The hum jumped, surging up my arm as my fingers closed around it. Suddenly, the window fogged over from the inside, and a distorted face pressed close to the glass. It had eyes, too many eyes, glowing faintly red, and a mouth that opened wide to let out a guttural, broken wail. Pete gasped and grabbed my arm. "Don't!" But before I could pull away, the door slammed open, throwing us both backward into the hallway wall. The face was gone, but the hum had erupted into a high-pitched scream that rattled my teeth. I staggered to my feet, heart hammering, and realized the hallway behind us had vanished. The walls were now close enough to touch on either side, smooth and unyielding. "We're trapped," Pete said, voice barely above a whisper. The hum faded into a slow, steady pulse. From somewhere deep inside the house, the voice whispered again, soft, electric, almost a muse. Said, "Welcome home." The words echoed softly, vibrating through the air like static over a radio. I pressed my ear to the cold wall, heart pounding. The voice was faint, almost a whisper, but unmistakably there. "Welcome home," it repeated, slower this time, like a promise or a warning. Pete's hand gripped my arm, his face pale. "We need to find a way out, now." I nodded, trying to shake off the creeping dread curling in my gut. The walls seemed to pulse beneath my fingers, alive and watching. The wallpaper rippled, like water disturbed by a stone, and faint flickers of light played beneath the surface. We moved cautiously down the narrow corridor, every sound amplified, our breathing, the scrape of boots on warped floorboards, the faint hum turning to a low murmur. Suddenly, a door to our left creaked open slowly. We froze. A cold breeze, smelling faintly of burnt metal, spilled into the hallway. From inside came soft, irregular tapping, like fingernails drumming on a hollow box. I raised my flashlight and shone it inside. The room was empty except for a single chair facing the wall. The wallpaper behind it bubbled and shifted as if breathing. Pete swallowed hard. This house is not just haunted, it's alive. A chill ran down my spine. I stepped forward, the floorboards groaning beneath me. The tapping stopped abruptly. A whisper rose from the shadows, fractured, digital, like a voice glitching on a corrupted recording. "Find the source." I spun toward Pete, but his eyes were wide with fear. "It's inside the walls. We're not just trapped, we're part of it now." The hum escalated to a piercing shriek. The wallpaper began to peel away in thin strips, revealing twisting, glowing wires beneath, veins pulsing with a sickly red light. I staggered back, the smell of burnt ozone thick in my nostrils. And then, from somewhere deep in the walls, a cold, mechanical voice whispered, "You belong here." The walls throbbed as if they had a heartbeat of their own. The wallpaper peeled in slow, deliberate strips, curling away to reveal a tangled web of wires beneath. They glowed faintly red, like veins pumping some dark lifeblood through the house. The hum turned to a pulse, steady and insistent, matching the rhythm I felt beneath my skin. I reached out, trembling, to touch one of the cables. The heat radiating from it was sharp and alive. Suddenly a whisper broke through the murmur, a voice fractured and distorted, but unmistakably human. "Find me." Pete grabbed my shoulder, his eyes wide with panic. "It's trying to communicate. Whatever this thing is, it's alive." I nodded slowly, swallowing the knot of fear tightening in my throat. There has to be a source, a central point where it all begins. The hallway seemed to stretch and bend, pulling us deeper into the house's twisted core. The wires beneath the wallpaper writhed like snakes, some twitching and sparking where my fingers brushed them. A door appeared ahead, old and splintered, almost hidden in the shadows. I reached for the knob. It was cold, slick, and pulsing with electricity. As I turned it, the hum surged into a deafening roar. The door creaked open to reveal a small room bathed in blood-red light. In the center was a massive tangle of cables and wires, pulsing rhythmically like a beating heart. Amid the wires lay a figure, half man, half machine, his skin stretched taut over metal, eyes glowing faintly red. He looked up at us, his voice a broken whisper. "I am the circuit." The room shook violently, the wires thrashing like living creatures. The hum became a scream, and I knew then. This house was no longer just a building. It was a monstrous entity, and we were trapped inside its beating heart. The figure's eyes, faintly glowing embers in the red light, locked onto mine. His voice, fragile but relentless, whispered, "You're part of the circuit now. No one leaves." I swallowed hard, trying to digest the impossible truth. The wires writhed beneath him like living tendrils, pulsing with an energy that felt both mechanical and malevolent. The air thickened with a metallic scent, and the hum vibrated through my bones. Pete stepped closer, but his face drained of color. "We need to get out. Now." "No," I said, voice barely steady. Something inside me tugged, a strange warmth beneath my skin that pulsed in rhythm with the cables. It was like the house was calling me home, pulling me deeper into its grasp. The figure's hand extended, tangled in wires that seemed to grow from his flesh. "The house feeds on us," he said. "It's a living circuit, a trap for those who enter." The room's walls flexed and breathed. The wires tightened their hold around the figure as he spoke, as if protecting him, or imprisoning him. Suddenly, a jolt surged through my arm, and I gasped. The same glowing veins beneath my skin flared fiercely, burning and binding me to the house. Panic clawed at my chest. I tried to pull away, but my body betrayed me. Pete shouted, "Fight it! Don't let it own you!" I clenched my fists, summoning every shred of willpower. The hum escalated, a monstrous roar filling the room as the wires pulsed violently. For a moment, I felt the house's presence inside me, suffocating, overwhelming. But then, a spark of resistance flickered. I wasn't ready to surrender. Not yet. The burn beneath my skin was relentless, like molten metal flowing through my veins. Every pulse of the house echoed inside me, its twisted energy trying to claim my mind and body. I gritted my teeth, willing myself to stay focused. The figure on the floor, the circuit, watched me with a mix of pity and desperation. "It wants you to give in, to become part of the house's power," he rasped. Pete crouched beside me, breathing hard. "We have to cut the connection, find where it's strongest and sever it." I nodded, but the glowing lines under my skin flared, pulsing in sync with the massive tangle of wires behind the figure. It was like a heartbeat, a terrible, mechanical heart keeping the house alive. I inched toward the tangle, flashlight shaking. The wires writhed, thick and slick, emitting sparks where they touched. My fingers brushed one, and the pain was instant, sharp, white-hot fire that seared through my arm. I pulled back, swallowing a scream. The hum rose, filling the room with a deafening roar. "We don't have much time," Pete warned, glancing nervously at the flickering lights. Using my pliers, I grabbed a thick cable and twisted. The insulation cracked, revealing glowing fibers beneath. The wires hissed, recoiling like angry serpents, but I squeezed harder until they snapped with a deafening pop. The room shook violently. The circuit on the floor gasped, his body convulsing as the wires around him writhed in agony. The glow beneath my skin flickered, but stayed. I wasn't free yet. Suddenly, a deep, guttural growl echoed from the walls. The house was fighting back, alive, furious, and hungry. "We have to keep going," I said through gritted teeth, "or it'll consume us all." Pete nodded. "Then let's finish this nightmare." The house trembled with rage, a low rumble vibrating through the walls. The severed cables sparked violently, sending showers of molten sparks across the tangled mass in the center of the room. My skin still burned with the residual heat of the connection, the glow beneath it flickering like a dying flame. But I wasn't done, not by a long shot. Pete and I exchanged a glance, silent agreement. We'd come too far to stop now. I grabbed another thick cable, the insulation slick with moisture. The wires inside writhed like living things, pulsing in time with the house's furious heartbeat. "Ready?" Pete asked, voice tight. I nodded. With a grunt, I twisted the pliers, slicing through the cable. The hiss it released was like a wounded animal's scream. The walls convulsed, dust raining down. A sharp crack split the air as a large section of plaster broke loose, revealing more veins of glowing wiring beneath. The circuit figure writhed, eyes flashing with pain and rage. "It's not just a house," he gasped. "It's a predator. It feeds on the energy it traps inside. Us." I swallowed my fear and plunged my hands into the wiring mass, yanking out a thick bundle. The cables twisted and writhed, but I held on. Suddenly, a searing pain shot through my arm as the glow beneath my skin flared bright. I cried out but forced myself to keep pulling until the wires snapped free with a final, terrible pop. The house shuddered violently, the hum dropping to a low growl. The walls flexed inward as if the building itself was trying to close in on us. "We need to get out, now!" Pete shouted, grabbing my arm. I nodded, heart pounding, and together we sprinted for the hallway. The house groaned and moaned behind us, its hunger not yet sated, but weakening. As we burst into the hallway, I couldn't shake the feeling that the house was watching, waiting for its next move. The hallway stretched endlessly before us, the walls seeming to breathe, closing in with every step. The dim light flickered, casting long, twisting shadows that danced just beyond the edge of my vision. Pete pulled at my arm, whispering, "We have to find another way out. The front door's sealed." I swallowed hard, the metallic taste thick in my mouth, and nodded. My skin still tingled where the wires had burned through. The house's pulse was in my veins now, a reminder that it hadn't given up on claiming me. As we moved forward, the floorboards creaked beneath us. A low rumble echoed through the walls, growing louder, more insistent. The hum I'd heard since arriving was morphing into something monstrous, a living, breathing force determined to keep us trapped. Suddenly, the hallway split, twisting in ways that defied logic. We took the left path, but it curved back on itself, leading us to the same spot we'd just fled. The walls shimmered, the wallpaper rippling like liquid, and faint whispers floated just out of earshot. "This place, it's changing," Pete said, panic creeping into his voice. I nodded grimly. "It's alive, and it's playing with us." A door appeared in the hallway, one we hadn't seen before. It creaked open slowly, revealing pitch darkness beyond. From within, a cold, mechanical voice whispered my name. I stepped closer, heart pounding. "Who's there?" The voice answered, distorted and fractured. "You belong to me." The floor trembled violently, and tendrils of glowing wire snaked from the cracks in the walls, reaching toward us like hungry fingers. Pete grabbed my arm, pulling me back. "Run!" We sprinted down the twisting corridor, the house roaring behind us, its hunger relentless. I glanced back once, catching a glimpse of the glowing eye watching from the shadows. Waiting, always waiting. There was no escape. We barreled down the twisting corridor, my breath ragged, every step swallowed by the house's monstrous growl behind us. The tendrils of glowing wire retreated momentarily, but I knew it was only a pause, a waiting strike. The walls around us shimmered and warped, a sickening fluidity that defied reality. Then, suddenly, a soft clicking sound echoed through the hallway, rhythmic and deliberate. I froze. From a crack in the plaster beside me, a single, unblinking eye emerged. It was pale and wet, embedded within a writhing mass of copper wires. The eye blinked slowly, then fixed its gaze on me. A chill slithered down my spine. The eye pulsed, veins of electricity sparking beneath its surface. It wasn't just watching, it was learning, waiting for me to make a move. Pete gripped my shoulder, his voice a harsh whisper. "It's studying you, trying to figure you out." I swallowed hard, heart pounding. The eye twitched and blinked again, and then, without warning, it vanished back into the wall, leaving only a faint scorch mark where it had been. The hallway suddenly twisted again, leading us to a dead end. But the wall ahead wasn't solid. It rippled, like oil on water. From its center, a hole burst open, releasing a swarm of tiny metallic insects. They crawled along the walls and ceiling, their bodies flickering with electrical energy. Pete raised his flashlight, shining it on the swarm. They scattered, hissing like angry serpents, then regrouped to block our escape. "We're trapped," I muttered, panic rising. The house's voice echoed through the walls, soft, amused, and terrifying. "You belong here." The glowing wires beneath my skin flared violently, reminding me I was becoming part of this nightmare. I looked at Pete, determination hardening my voice. "We have to fight. We have to find a way out." He nodded. "No matter what it takes." The house's whispering voice grew louder, clearer, filling every corner with a low hum that crawled beneath my skin. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was words, deliberate and chilling. "You cannot leave," it said, its tone soft but unyielding. "You belong to me." The walls vibrated with the command, the wallpaper undulating like waves. The glowing wires beneath my skin pulsed in time, a sick rhythm tying me closer to this monstrous place. Pete's eyes were wide with fear. "We have to silence it, find where it's speaking from." I nodded, though dread coiled in my gut. The voice seemed to come from everywhere, the walls, the floor, the very air. Yet somewhere deeper, something central pulsed like a heart. We moved cautiously down the distorted hallway, each step echoing louder than the last. The temperature dropped sharply, frost forming on the cracked plaster. Ahead, a door emerged from the shadows, black and slick like oil. The hum surged, becoming a deafening roar. I reached out, hand trembling, and pushed it open. Inside was a room that defied logic. Walls lined with flickering screens, wires snaking like serpents into a massive, pulsating core. The voice came from there, mechanical and ancient. "You will join us," it promised. "Together, we are eternal." The core glowed brighter, and I felt the connection beneath my skin flare painfully. Images flooded my mind, faces twisted in agony, trapped forever within this living nightmare. Pete grabbed my arm. "We have to destroy it, now." I nodded, heart pounding. I pulled out my pliers, stepping forward toward the core. The house groaned, a sound like bones cracking. The voice screamed, furious and desperate. I clenched my jaw. This was the moment. Fight or become part of the house forever. The core pulsed violently, its blood-red glow casting jagged shadows across the room. The screens flickered with distorted faces, screaming silently as if begging for release. My fingers trembled, but I gripped the pliers tight. The glowing wires feeding into the core writhed like serpents, snapping and twisting with a life of their own. Pete stood beside me, eyes wide and steady. "We have one chance. Cut the right wires or we'll be trapped forever." I took a deep breath and plunged the pliers into the thickest cable. The wire hissed and sparked, but I twisted hard. A sharp pop echoed as it snapped. The room shuddered violently, dust falling from the ceiling. The core's glow flickered but didn't die. I grabbed another wire, this time thinner but pulsing with blue light. Suddenly the house roared, an unholy sound that shook every bone in my body. The walls bent inward, trying to crush us. "We're running out of time," Pete shouted. I focused on the wires, cutting and twisting with frantic determination. Sparks flew, lighting the room in bursts of white and red. The faces on the screens twisted in anguish as the connection weakened. The core shuddered, then exploded in a burst of light and sound. The walls cracked, the hum died, and the oppressive heat vanished like a bad dream. For a moment, silence. Then the power surged back. The house groaned one last time before falling still, its hunger finally quenched. Pete and I collapsed against the wall, breathless but alive. The glow beneath my skin faded, leaving only cold sweat and aching limbs. "We did it," Pete said quietly. I nodded, exhausted but relieved. The nightmare was over. But as I looked around, I realized the house was still watching. And somewhere deep inside, a faint whisper remained. The house seemed to breathe in the quiet, as if relieved and yet watching us with an unseen eye. The oppress. I's hum was gone, replaced by an unsettling stillness that pressed against my skin like a weight. Pete and I sat on the cracked floor, catching our breath. The glow beneath my skin had finally faded, but the cold sweat clung to me like a second skin. "We broke it," I whispered, voice hoarse. "We actually broke it." Pete nodded, eyes scanning the room, wary. "But something's wrong. It feels too quiet." The house groaned softly, a deep, mournful sound that echoed through the empty halls. The shadows seemed to flicker in the corners of my vision, just out of focus. I rose slowly, the floor creaking beneath my feet. "We need to get out, before it wakes." We moved toward the door we'd entered, but the hallway shifted beneath us. The walls bent and twisted, warping the space until the door was nowhere to be found. Panic flared in my chest. "It's not over," I said, voice tight. Pete gritted his teeth. "Then we find another way. There has to be one." The house whispered again, a soft, almost affectionate voice threading through the air like silk. "Stay," it said. "Stay forever." I felt the wires beneath my skin stir once more, faint and teasing. A reminder that I was still connected, still part of this place. "We have to fight," I said, determination hardening my voice. Pete nodded. "Together." The house seemed to pulse around us, a living beast watching, waiting. But I refused to give in. Not yet. Because somewhere in the darkness, I knew the real battle was only beginning. The house shifted beneath our feet, corridors folding and twisting like a living maze. Every direction led to confusion, doors opening to walls, hallways curling back on themselves like a serpent biting its tail. Pete and I stumbled forward, hearts pounding. The walls pulsed with a faint red glow, and the metallic scent thickened, suffocating and sharp. The glow beneath my skin flickered weakly, a constant reminder of the house's lingering grip. "Which way?" Pete asked, panic sharpening his voice. I shook my head. "I don't know, it's changing." Ahead, a narrow doorway appeared, framed by warped wood. We ducked through, landing in a room filled with shattered mirrors. The fragments reflected distorted images of ourselves, faces twisted by fear and exhaustion. Suddenly, the hum returned, low and menacing, vibrating through the glass shards. The broken reflections shimmered, and in each, eyes glowed red, watching, waiting. From behind us came a soft clicking, slow and deliberate. Turning, I saw a dozen small orbs, glowing faintly and moving with unnatural grace. They floated like fireflies, but their light was harsh, cold. Pete grabbed my arm. "They're guiding us, or trapping us." We followed the orbs cautiously, navigating the maze of broken glass and warped walls. The path twisted again, the air growing colder, heavier. A sudden crack split the silence. The floor beneath us trembled, and the mirrors shattered completely, plunging the room into darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight. When I switched it on, the orbs vanished. We were alone in the dark. The house's voice whispered again, close and threatening. "You cannot escape the circuit." I gripped Pete's hand tightly. "We have to keep moving. Together," he whispered. And so, we pressed forward, into the heart of the nightmare. The darkness swallowed us whole as the orbs vanished. My flashlight's weak beam barely pierced the black, trembling shadows. The silence between breaths was thick, heavier than before. Pete's grip tightened on my hand. "Stay close." We stepped forward, every creak and groan of the floor echoing like a drumbeat deep within the house's belly. The hum returned, faint but steady, a heartbeat pulsing beneath us. The walls seemed to lean inward, closing off the path behind. The air grew thick with the scent of burnt wires and cold iron. Suddenly, the floor beneath my feet vibrated violently. I stumbled, clutching at Pete. "We're above it," he said grimly. "The heart of this nightmare." Ahead, a trapdoor appeared, framed by old wood cracked and swollen with moisture. The hum intensified, growing louder, a pulse thrumming in time with the wires glowing beneath the cracked plaster. I took a deep breath and lifted the door. A rush of hot electric air escaped, smelling of ozone and decay. Below, a narrow staircase spiraled down into darkness. "This is it," I said, flashlight flickering. Pete nodded, swallowing hard. No turning back now. Step by step we descended. The walls closed around us, wires writhing like snakes beneath peeling paint. The heartbeat grew louder, almost deafening, a monstrous rhythm echoing in our chests. At the bottom, a cavernous chamber sprawled before us. In its center, a massive, pulsating core of cables and flickering lights throbbed like a living beast. The circuit figure lay slumped nearby, his eyes glowing faintly. "It never stops," he whispered. "The heart beats for eternity." I swallowed the rising terror. We were deeper than ever, trapped inside a machine that fed on souls, a house alive and hungry. The battle wasn't over. It was only beginning. The cavernous chamber swallowed us in its eerie glow, the pulsating core casting long shadows that danced like phantoms on the walls. Each rhythmic beat of that monstrous heart echoed inside my chest, sinking with the glow beneath my skin, a tether I couldn't break. Pete stepped cautiously toward the core, eyes scanning the tangled mass of cables. "This is the source," he whispered, voice barely steady. "Cutting this might end it all, or trap us forever." I swallowed the knot of fear twisting in my stomach. The house had already shown it could warp reality, trap us in endless corridors and rooms that didn't exist before, but staying meant certain doom. I knelt, running a trembling hand over the glowing wires that led into the core. The heat radiated like a living thing, pulsing against my skin. My fingers found a thick cable, coated with pulsating red light. The hum escalated, turning into a growl that vibrated through the floor. The figure known as the circuit stirred weakly, murmuring unintelligible words. His eyes glowed brighter, filled with warning and pain. "We have to act now," I said, voice strained, "before the house reacts." Pete nodded, gripping his tools tight. Together we plunged into the web of wires, snipping and severing, sparks flying with every cut. The core's pulse faltered and the house convulsed in agony, walls shaking violently as if the building itself was dying. Suddenly, a shriek ripped through the chamber, sharp and unrelenting. I stumbled back, clutching my arm where a spark had singed my skin. The core flickered, then exploded into a burst of blinding light and electricity. When my vision cleared, the chamber was still. The house was silent. But the glow beneath my skin remained. A grim reminder that the battle might be over, but the war was far from won. The blinding light faded, leaving us gasping in a silence so thick it pressed against our ears. The pulsating core lay shattered, wires severed and sparking weakly. The house's oppressive energy had retreated, for now. Pete wiped sweat from his brow. "Is it really over?" he asked, voice shaky but hopeful. I shook my head, exhaustion weighing heavy. The glow beneath my skin pulsed faintly, a stubborn ember refusing to die. This place had claimed a piece of me. Or maybe I had become part of it. The walls around us were still, but the shadows seemed deeper, as if watching from just beyond sight. The house wasn't finished. "We need to find a way out," I said, voice steady despite the fatigue, "before it recovers." We moved cautiously through the twisted corridors, the air thick with the scent of burnt wire and something faintly metallic, like blood. Every step felt heavy, like the house was pulling us down, urging us to stay. At the end of the hallway, a door shimmered into existence, the only exit we'd seen in hours. Relief surged, but a cold voice whispered at the back of my mind, "You cannot leave." Pete glanced at me, eyes filled with doubt. "Do you hear that?" I nodded, swallowing hard. The voice wasn't a threat, it was a promise. The house was patient. It would wait for us to falter. We reached the door, hands trembling as we pushed it open. The night air hit us like a wave, crisp and real. For a moment, I thought we were free. But as we stepped out, the glow beneath my skin flared fiercely, pain shooting through my veins. I looked down to see thin wires, like veins of light crawling beneath my skin, still connected. The house's hold wasn't broken, not completely. I glanced at Pete, breathless. This isn't over. It never will be. The chill of the night air did little to ease the burning sensation beneath my skin. The wires, thin, glowing strands, threaded their way just beneath the surface, pulsing with a sinister light. I flexed my fingers, trying to shake off the feeling that I was no longer fully my own. Pete glanced at my arm, eyes narrowing. Those aren't just marks. You're still connected. I nodded, swallowing hard. The house's influence lingered like a parasite, feeding on my energy, pulling me back even from a distance. We need help, I said, voice barely above a whisper. Someone who understands this. Technology. Pete hesitated. You mean a hacker or someone who deals with electrical systems? Exactly, I replied. If this thing is part machine, part living entity, maybe we can find a way to sever the link. The glow beneath my skin flickered violently, sending a wave of nausea through me. I clenched my fists, fighting the urge to collapse. Pete reached out, steadying me. We're in this together. Determined, we made our way to my truck, the night heavy with silence and unseen eyes watching from the shadows. The town seemed asleep, unaware of the nightmare lurking just beyond its borders. As I started the engine, the house's whispers echoed faintly in my mind, soft, coaxing, reminding me of the connection I couldn't yet break. We'll figure this out, Pete said, breaking the silence. I forced a weak smile. We have to. Driving away, the road stretched endlessly ahead, dark and uncertain. The wires beneath my skin pulsed, a constant reminder that the house's grip extended far beyond its walls, and that no matter how far I ran, I was still bound. The city lights blurred as Pete and I sped toward the outskirts where tech experts lived and worked, people who might understand the unnatural fusion of flesh and circuitry threading beneath my skin. Every pulse of that glow's wing wire was a reminder of how little time we had. Do you think they'll believe us? Pete asked, glancing sideways. I shrugged. They'll believe the evidence. This isn't just some haunted house story. It's a living machine, and it's inside me. We pulled into a dimly lit parking lot outside a rundown warehouse converted into a tech lab. The hum of servers and blinking lights greeted us as we stepped inside. An older woman looked up, eyes sharp behind thick glasses. You're not from around here, she said. I'm Usama, I said, voice steady. I need help. Something inside this house infected me. Wires under my skin. A pulse I can't control. She studied my arm, then nodded slowly. You're telling me you're part of a living circuit? Exactly, and I don't know how to break free. She motioned us to a workstation. Let me see what I can find. Her fingers danced over the keyboard, scanning, probing the data streaming from the device she'd hooked to me. Minutes stretched like hours. Then her eyes widened. This isn't normal. It's a hybrid of organic tissue and advanced circuitry, something experimental, maybe alien. Pete swallowed. So it's alive? She nodded grimly. And it's spreading. You're a host now. We have to act fast. My heart pounded. What do we do? She paused, voice low and urgent. We try to sever the connection, cut the signal, but it won't be easy. It's evolved to resist. The wires beneath my skin pulsed violently, almost in response. The house's grip was tightening, even from miles away. I met Pete's gaze. We're not done yet. This fight's just beginning. The lab was a chaotic blend of blinking lights and humming machines, each one tracking the strange connection embedded beneath my skin. The specialist, Dr. Nadia, worked tirelessly, her fingers flying over the keyboard. This technology, she muttered, eyes scanning streams of data. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. It's advanced, adaptive, almost symbiotic. Pete and I exchanged uneasy glances. Symbiotic? I asked. Dr. Nadia nodded. It feeds on the host's energy, but also integrates with the nervous system. That's why you feel it pulsing inside you. A sharp beep interrupted her thoughts. There's a signal, she said. Somewhere the house is trying to communicate with you through the wires. The screen flickered, showing a series of images, fragments of the house's interior, distorted faces, and a pulsing red core. It's alive, Pete said quietly. Yes, Dr. Nadia confirmed. And it's been experimenting, trying to expand its reach beyond the house, infecting people, turning them into conduits. A chill ran down my spine. So, it's a living nightmare that spreads. She nodded solemnly. The only way to stop it is to isolate the connection and sever the signal, but it's designed to resist. It adapts quickly. My hands trembled. What happens if we fail? Dr. Nadia's gaze hardened. It consumes you, body and soul. The weight of her words settled heavily on us. The house's malevolent presence was no longer confined to a single location. It was inside me, growing stronger. Pete clenched his fists. We won't let that happen. I took a deep breath, the wires beneath my skin pulsing in painful rhythm. The fight wasn't just for survival anymore. It was a battle to reclaim my very self. As the lab's monitors flickered, I realized the nightmare was far from over. The experiment was only beginning. Dr. Nadia leaned over her console, eyes scanning the swirling D, out of patterns representing the living circuit inside me. This is our best chance, she said, voice steady but urgent. We need to disrupt the signal long enough to sever the connection. Temporary chaos inside the system might give us the opening. Pete and I exchanged a glance. It sounded risky, dangerous, but it was the only way. What's the plan? I asked. She pulled up a schematic of the circuit network, the glowing veins that spread beneath my skin like roots. We're going to use a pulse generator, a device that emits high-frequency electrical bursts. It'll overload the circuit and force it to disconnect. I swallowed hard. And if it fights back, we'll have to be ready for anything, Dr. Nadia said grimly. This thing adapts. The house will try to resist with everything it has. Pete clenched his jaw. We don't have a choice. The lab filled with the buzzing of machines as preparations began. The pulse generator was hooked up to electrodes carefully placed on my arms, ready to send surges through the network beneath my skin. The air grew thick with tension as I lay on the table, every nerve on edge. The wires under my skin pulsed violently, reacting to the generator's presence. Dr. Nadia's voice broke the silence. On my mark, 3, 2, 1. A sharp burst of electricity surged through me, burning and tingling as the pulse raced through the circuit. The room trembled, and the hum of the house echoed faintly in my mind, angry and desperate. For a moment, everything went silent. Then the wires beneath my skin flickered and began to recede, pulling away like shadows at dawn. Pete squeezed my hand. You're breaking free. But deep down, I knew this was only the beginning of a fight for my soul. The pulse generator's electrical surge rippled through me like a wildfire, scorching the wires beneath my skin. Pain flared bright and sudden, but as the seconds passed, the glowing veins began to dim, flickering like dying embers. I gasped, gripping the edge of the table as the connection slowly weakened. The house's hold was retreating. I could feel it pulling away, desperate and angry. Dr. Nadia's eyes never left the monitors, watching the signals falter and fade. It's working, she said breathlessly. You're breaking free. Pete squeezed my hand, relief flooding his face. We're winning. But the house wasn't done yet. Suddenly, the chamber trembled violently. The walls groaned and cracked, the lights flickering erratically. A cold wind swept through the lab, carrying a faint whisper. You cannot escape. The wires beneath my skin flared one last time, sharp and fierce. The connection screamed in agony, fighting with everything left inside it. I gritted my teeth, summoning every ounce of willpower to hold the line. The pulse generator fired another burst, and this time the glow retreated faster, the veins shrinking into nothingness. The house howled in frustration, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in my bones. The room fell silent. I lay there, chest heaving, sweat slicking my skin. The wires had almost vanished. The glow beneath my skin reduced to faint, harmless flickers. "We did it," I whispered, disbelief and hope mixing in my voice. Dr. Nadia nodded, exhaustion etched into her face. "For now, but you're not completely free." I looked down at my arms, still trembling. "What now?" She met my eyes. "We keep fighting. We find a way to destroy the source, the house itself." Pete stood, determination burning bright. "We'll finish this, together." And with that, the battle for my soul and the nightmare of the house was far from over. Weight of the connection was lighter, but the battle was far from over. The wires beneath my skin had dimmed, but the house's sinister presence still lingered like a shadow at the edge of my mind. Dr. Nadia packed her equipment, her face set with determination. "The source is the house itself. Destroying the core there will break the connection permanently." Pete and I exchanged a tense glance. "We go back," I said quietly, "one last time." The drive back to the town was quiet, the night thick with foreboding. Every mile closer tightened the grip of dread in my chest. The house was waiting, its hunger as alive as ever. As we approached, the once familiar streets twisted strangely under the moonlight. Shadows lengthened, and the air buzzed with an eerie static. We stood before the house's warped front door. The walls seemed to pulse with a heartbeat, alive and watching. "Ready?" Pete asked, gripping his tools tightly. I nodded, for whatever comes next. Inside, the house greeted us with a silence that screamed. The air was thick with electricity, the smell of ozone sharp and biting. We moved carefully, following the faint glow of the core's energy beneath the floorboards. The pulsing heart of the house awaited us in the cellar, a monstrous, tangled mass of wires and cables glowing red-hot. Pete set up the pulse generator, connecting it to the core's thickest cables. "This ends now," I said, voice steady. As the generator powered up, the house screamed, walls shaking violently, wires writhing like living snakes. The core flared brightly, then exploded in a burst of blinding light and shattered silence. When the dust settled, the house was still, dead. For the first time, the oppressive weight lifted. The wires beneath my skin faded completely. We had won, but the scars remained. The house stood silent, its malevolent pulse finally extinguished. Yet as we stepped outside, a strange emptiness settled over me. The battle was won, but the echoes of the nightmare lingered like ghosts in my mind. Pete exhaled deeply. "It's over, right?" I nodded, but the wires beneath my skin were gone. Yet something deeper remained. A hollow ache, as if part of me was still tethered to that dark place. Days passed, but sleep was elusive. Shadows moved where none should be. Sounds whispered just beyond hearing. The house's silence was deafening, filled with memories I couldn't shake. I found myself drawn back to the edges of town, staring at where the house once loomed. The empty lot felt charged, a sinister energy simmering beneath the surface. One night, I woke to a soft glow on my arm, faint but unmistakable. The wires, or what was left of them, pulsed weakly beneath my skin. Panic surged. "Not again," I whispered. Pete noticed the change immediately. "It's trying to come back." We scoured the remains, searching for any trace of the core or its tendrils, but all we found was silence, a cold, empty void. Still, I felt watched. The house's hunger was patient, waiting for its moment to rise again. I realized the nightmare was not confined to walls or circuits. It was inside me, a living scar I couldn't erase. Pete placed a hand on my shoulder. "We've faced worse. We'll find a way." I wanted to believe him. But deep down, a question burned. Was the house ever truly destroyed? Or was it just sleeping, waiting for its chance to reclaim me and anyone else it could trap? The wires beneath my skin pulsed once more, a silent promise that the story wasn't over. Weeks passed in uneasy calm, but the stillness felt fragile, like the house itself was holding its breath, waiting. The faint pulse beneath my skin was a constant reminder that the nightmare wasn't finished. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, the lights flickered violently. The air grew thick, charged with static. The soft, whispering voice returned, barely audible but unmistakable. "Come back." I froze, heart hammering. The wires beneath my skin glowed faintly, crawling closer to the surface. Pete burst in, concern etched deep into his features. "It's happening again. The connection is trying to rebuild." Panic tightened its grip. We scrambled through old notes, revisiting the data Dr. Nadia had collected. "We missed something," Pete muttered. "A failsafe, or a seed." The realization hit hard. This wasn't just a house or a machine. It was a contagion, and it had a way to come back. Determined, we traced the origin of the new signals to a derelict building on the outskirts of town. The air there was colder, heavy with decay. Inside, the walls pulsed with faint veins of light, shadows shifting in the corners. The familiar hum of electricity filled the air, growing louder with each step. We found remnants of old wiring fused with something organic, half machine, half flesh, growing and spreading. "This is the seed," I whispered, "the heart of its rebirth." The house wasn't gone. It had multiplied, infecting new places, waiting for the right moment to rise. Pete gripped my arm. "We have to stop it, before it's too late." The fight was far from over. The nightmare had found a new beginning, and this time, it was more dangerous than ever. The seed we discovered was worse than I imagined, a grotesque fusion of wires and flesh, pulsating with unnatural life. The air around it shimmered, reality warping as if the world itself was breaking. Pete and I moved cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The walls seemed to breathe, shadows twisting into impossible shapes. Every step felt like walking deeper into a nightmare. "This thing isn't just alive," Pete whispered. "It's tearing the fabric of reality." I nodded grimly. The hum grew louder, a low growl vibrating through the ground. The wires beneath my skin pulsed in response, a painful reminder of the connection still alive within me. Suddenly, the seed quivered, sending out tendrils of light that wrapped around the walls, warping space and time. The corridor bent, stretching into infinity before snapping back with a jarring crack. Pete grabbed my arm. "We have to destroy it, now." I pulled out the pulse generator, but the device trembled in my hands, its power barely enough to affect this new horror. The seed pulsed fiercely, emitting waves of static that disoriented us. Visions flashed before my eyes, faces trapped in endless loops, rooms shifting and collapsing. "We're fighting a living nightmare," I said, voice shaking. Pete steadied me. "Then we fight with everything we have." We moved closer, pulse generator charged and ready. The wires beneath my skin flared, as if warning me of the danger. With a surge of will, I unleashed the pulse. The seed convulsed, light exploding in bursts that shattered the warped walls. But as the light faded, I saw the seed fracture, but not disappear. It split, sending shards of its twisted form scattering into the shadows. The nightmare had fractured, but it was far from over. The shattered seed cracked into countless fragments, each slipping away like shadows melting into the darkness. The room's wubby, arped walls pulsed with fading light, but I knew better than to believe the nightmare was over. Pete's face was grim. "It's spreading." The fragments, pieces of that twisted fusion of wire and flesh, were multiplying, seeding new horrors in the shadows. The house's infection was no longer confined, it was multiplying, fracturing into an endless web of terror. I felt the faint pulse beneath my skin quicken, as if warning me that the tendrils of the house were reaching farther than ever before. "We have to find every piece," I said, voice tight, "before it grows beyond control." Pete nodded, loading his tools. "This isn't just a house anymore, it's a contagion." We set out into the darkened streets, guided only by the faint, eerie glow pulsing beneath my skin. Every alley, every abandoned building became a potential nest for the growing nightmare. The town felt transformed, its familiar places twisted into corridors of fear and uncertainty. Shadows moved just beyond sight, and the air hummed with unnatural energy. At times, the wires beneath my skin flickered, their glow illuminating faces distorted by terror and pain, souls trapped in the house's endless web. Pete caught my gaze. "We're racing against time." As we hunted the fragments, the house's voice echoed faintly in the wind, a whisper promising return. revenge, and eternal hunger. The fight was no longer just about survival. It was a battle to save the town, maybe even the world, from a creeping darkness that defied understanding. I clenched my fists. The nightmare was multiplying, and we had to stop it before everything was lost. The fragment's glow pulsed stronger as we ventured deeper into the abandoned district, an eerie maze of broken windows and crumbling walls. The town felt consumed by shadows, as if the house's corruption had infected every corner. With every step, the pulse beneath my skin throbbed violently, syncing with the fragment's spreading light. It was as though I was tethered to the nightmare's heart, dragged closer with each breath. Pete moved cautiously, scanning the darkness. These pieces are forming a web, like a network, growing stronger. I nodded grimly, and if it completes the web, it could consume everything. The air grew thick with static, the hairs on my arms standing on end. The house's whisper echoed faintly, a sibilant promise of inevitable doom. Suddenly, a tendril shot from the shadows, lashing toward us like a living whip. Pete barely dodged, tools clattering to the ground. "We're not alone," he warned. I clenched my fists, feeling the wires beneath my skin flare with heat and energy. The connection was fighting back, resisting our efforts. More tendrils emerged, writhing in the darkness, weaving a trap of electric shadows. We backed toward a crumbling wall, cornered in the house's expanding web. "Stay focused," I urged Pete. "We destroy the fragments, that's our only chance." Grabbing a shard of the fractured seed, I activated the pulse generator. The device hummed, charging with raw power. The tendrils hissed, recoiling from the energy. With a sharp burst, I unleashed the pulse. The fragments shattered, tendrils retreating like wounded beasts. For a moment, silence reclaimed the night. But deep in my gut, I knew it wasn't over. The web was fragile, but it still held, and the nightmare was waiting to strike again. The shattered fragments dissolved in the pulse's wake, but the eerie glow persisted, flickering faintly in the distance. The Wabiu. Eve was cracking, but deep within, something more sinister stirred. Pete and I pressed forward, the weight of the night pressing on our shoulders. The pulsing beneath my skin grew erratic, like a warning heartbeat. We followed the faint trail of light through winding alleys and forgotten tunnels. At last, we reached an old industrial complex, its skeletal frame casting long shadows in the moonlight. The air was thick with ozone, the metallic scent sharp and biting. "This is it," Pete whispered. "The source." Inside, the walls pulsed with living circuitry, veins of light threading through rusted pipes and broken concrete. The house's infection had taken root here. This hidden core was feeding the nightmare's spread. The hum was deafening, vibrating through my bones. The wires beneath my skin flared, aching with connection. We moved cautiously toward a massive chamber where the core throbbed like a heart, an immense tangle of wires, cables, and organic tissue fused in grotesque harmony. Pete set up the pulse generator, sweat glistening on his brow. "We end this now," he said. I nodded, heart pounding. The air crackled with electricity as we prepared to sever the nightmare's source. But as the generator powered up, the core pulsed violently, faster, stronger, as if alive and fighting for survival. A deep, guttural growl echoed through the chamber, shaking the ground beneath us. "We're running out of time," I said, voice steady despite the fear. The wires beneath my skin burned fiercely, a final warning from the house itself. I gripped Pete's arm. "We have to do this, no matter the cost." The chamber shook violently as the core pulsed with unnatural fury. The tangled mass of wires and flesh writhed like a living beast, resisting every attempt to sever its lifeline. Sweat poured down Pete's face as he adjusted the pulse generator, every muscle tense. "We have to overload it," Pete said, voice strained. "Blast it until it burns out." I nodded, feeling the heat of the wires beneath my skin intensify, their glow brightening with desperate energy. The house was fighting for survival, refusing to let go. The pulse generator emitted a deep hum, building power as the air crackled around us. The core's glow flickered but then flared violently, responding with a burst of blinding light and a deafening roar. A shockwave knocked us off our feet, and for a moment darkness swallowed everything. When I opened my eyes, the chamber was eerily silent. The core lay motionless, darkened and still. I struggled to stand, my body aching but determined. Pete was beside me, breathing heavily. Is it over? I touched my arms. The wires beneath my skin had faded to nothing. The connection was severed. For now, I said, voice low but resolute. As we made our way out, the house seemed to groan one last time, a mournful sound fading into silence. Outside, the cold night air filled my lungs, fresh and real. We had survived the nightmare's heart, but the scars, both physical and mental, would remain. And though the house was silent, the darkness it left behind whispered of secrets yet to be uncovered. A question lingered in the night. Had we truly escaped? Or was the nightmare only sleeping? The house stood quiet, its sinister heartbeat finally stilled. Yet, as Pete and I walked away, a strange weight hung in the air, unseen but undeniable. The wires beneath my skin were gone, but the emptiness they left felt heavier than the burning connection ever was. My mind was a maze of memories and shadows, fragments of the nightmare echoing long after the house's walls. I tried to sleep, but dreams twisted into haunting scenes, corridors folding impossibly, whispers echoing in endless loops. The house's voice lingered, cold and patient. Pete noticed my silence. "You're still here," he said quietly, "even after everything." I nodded, unable to find words. The nightmare had become part of me, etched deep into my soul. Days turned into restless nights, the town returning to its quiet routine, oblivious to the darkness we'd battled. But I knew better. One evening, while alone, the faintest flicker of light traced my arm, a ghost of the wires that once pulsed beneath my skin. Panic surged, but I forced myself to breathe. The house's hold wasn't over. It never would be. Pete and I met again, poring over notes, searching for answers in the lingering shadows. "We need to prepare," he said. "If it wakes again, we have to be ready." I agreed, steeling myself for a future where the nightmare was never truly gone. The silence was deafening, but beneath it, something stirred, a whisper in the dark, promising that the house's story wasn't finished. The shadows may be silent now, but they waited, and so did I. The days blurred into restless nights as the lingering presence of the house clung to me like a shadow I couldn't shake. The wires beneath my skin were gone, but their absence left a hollow ache, a void that whispered secrets I couldn't fully understand. Pete and I prepared for the inevitable, the house's return, with quiet determination. We gathered equipment, studied old records, and searched for any clue that might give us an edge next time. One night, I sat alone in the dark, the silence pressing down. A soft hum filled the room, barely audible at first, then growing louder. The unmistakable heartbeat of the house echoing in my mind. A faint glow traced along my arm, fragile but real. I whispered to the darkness, "Not again." But the house wasn't done. It never was. Pete's voice broke through the quiet, firm but gentle. "We face it together, whatever comes." I nodded, drawing strength from the promise. The nightmare was patient, a slow-burning fire beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to ignite. But this time, I would be ready. The house's last whisper echoed in the night, a chilling promise that the story was far from over. The night air was cold and still as Pete and I faced the empty lot where the house once stood, a hollow scar against the dark sky. The nightmare's heart had been shattered, yet an uneasy silence lingered, thick with unspoken dread. The wires beneath my skin had vanished completely, but a part of me remained tethered to the darkness, an invisible door waiting to be opened. As we turned to leave, a faint shimmer caught my eye. Just beyond the shadows, a doorway materializing, framed by flickering light and cold mist. "Did you see that?" Pete whispered, eyes wide. I nodded, heart pounding. The house wasn't gone. It had never truly left. It existed between worlds, a door to something ancient and hungry. A voice echoed, inside my mind, soft and coaxing, "Come back." Fear and fascination warred within me. The nightmare had promised an end, but it delivered only a beginning. We stood at the threshold, caught between fleeing and confronting the unknown. Pete gripped my shoulder. Whatever's behind that door, we face it. Together. I took a deep breath, stepping forward into the mist. The door closed behind us, sealing our fate. Darkness swallowed us whole, and somewhere, far beyond sight, the house waited, silent, patient, eternal.